You gotta move. Yeah, you got to move when the Spirit says move. You got to move when the Spirit says move. When the Spirit says move, you got to move, oh Lord. You got to move when the Spirit says move. 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 You got to shout. Yeah, you got to shout when the Spirit says shout.
Shout, shout,
You got to shout when the Spirit says shout. When the Spirit says shout, you got to shout, oh Lord. You got to shout when the Spirit says shout. 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 You got to do. Yeah, I got to do when the Spirit says do. You got to do when the Spirit says do. When the Spirit says do, you got to do. Oh Lord, you got to do when the Spirit says do. 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 Bonjour. Good morning. Bienvenue. Welcome. Whether you're in the room or you're online, whether this is your very first or your 800,000th time, welcome, welcome. This would be a great time because the Spirit says to turn our cell phones to silent. Okay, the minister says to turn our cell phones to silent. Inspired by a Spirit, I'm sure. And our land acknowledgement, which begins our services, is offered today by Bob Foster. Bob, thank you for offering our land acknowledgement today.
Good morning. This, needless to say, is not a celebration. This is a little bit different mood. So we'll honor the Nisian, and then maybe we can return to our mood of joy and celebration. Each Sunday, we remind ourselves that the history of this area continues to live in people's lives and bodies, including our own. With the symbol of these black oak acorns, we remind ourselves that the Nisinan people are still here among us today, resilient beyond genocide and generations of erasure and exclusion from California's history. Let us remember with care that we gather today on Nisinan land and commit ourselves to work toward any fragments of justice that may be possible.
You may wonder why on a Justice Sunday we're telling the story of the flaming chalice. But I just learned something, and by the end of this story, you'll really understand. It has everything to do with the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee, which was founded in 1940 as the USC, the Unitarian Service Committee, and continues today after 80 years of activism. The mission of UUSC advances human rights and social justice. What does that have to do with the chalice? All around the world, partnering with those who confront unjust power structures and mobilizing the challenges to oppressive policies. Been seeing a few of those. The work is grounded in the belief that all people have inherent power and dignity. So, when Nazi Germany invaded Sudetenland in 1938, they occupied the northern part of Czechoslovakia, and the lives immediately unraveled. Thousands of people migrated away to seek safety, and many ended up in the southern part of the country. A Unitarian minister and a social worker living in Wellesley, Massachusetts, decided to live their faith and to seek and to live their faith and join the refugees in Prague. The Reverend Waitstill and Martha Sharp intended to contribute what they could to the persecuted people escaping the war. They took extraordinary risk in helping the refugees escape from the Nazi occupation and persecution in Europe. From this act by Reverend Waitstill and Martha Sharp came the USC, the Unitarian Service Committee, the predecessor to UUSC. It was established in 1940 to coordinate the humanitarian efforts to aid the European refugees during World War II. And an office was established in Lisbon, Portugal. Why Lisbon? Because Lisbon was the only open port in Europe and the preferred destination for most of the refugees. The USC took a special interest in helping artists, intellectuals, dissidents to escape from the Nazis. Many fled without the identification papers they needed in order to cross borders. So the Lisbon office concentrated especially on helping them obtain replacement papers. The Reverend Charles Joy ran that office, and he had an idea. He said, what if the USC issues travel documents ourselves to help the immigrants pass through the British blockades? The documents, which they created, certify that the immigrants were politically safe and sound. Pretty gutsy idea. He figured that the documents needed some sort of official-looking seal or something to make them look like this is the real thing. And he also knew that the immigrants were from many countries and spoke many different languages, so they needed a symbol that they could recognize so that they would know that it spoke to safety no matter what language they spoke. So in 1941, Reverend Charles Joy asked Hans Deutsch to create one. This artist was a refugee himself, born in Austria, and then when the Nazis invaded his country, he fled to Paris. And then when the Nazis invaded Paris, he fled to Portugal, where he met Reverend Joy. Draw a symbol, said Dr. Joy. Make it look important and official so that it will impress a lot of different countries. Yet have it show the spirit of our work, which is to help and to serve. And so, with a pencil and pen, Hans Deutsch drew a chalice with a flame, surrounded by a circle of protection and love. Refugees from all over Europe came to know and trust that sign. The flaming circle became a symbol of freedom and hope during the dark nights and the darker days of the war. When Reverend Joy sent a report to the American Unitarian Association in Boston, he explained the symbolism like this. It represents, as you see, a chalice with a flame, the kind of chalice which the Greeks and Romans put on their altars. The holy oil burning in it is a symbol of helpfulness and of sacrifice. The ancient and medieval art, in ancient and medieval art, this symbol is often found, and the design itself, now modernized and stylized as it is, reminds one of the signs seen in the old monastic manuscripts. This was in the mind of the artist when he designed it. Over 30 years later, in 1976, after the Unitarians and the Universalists had joined to form the Unitarian Universalist Association, or UUA, that circle became two, one for the Unitarians and one for the Universalists. The circles aren't inside each other, they are intertwined. They're connected just as you and I are connected to each other and to everything in the world. The chalice that was in the symbol wasn't in the middle of the circles. It's a little to one side to leave space for other ideas and other ways. There's always room for more in Unitarian Universalism. Today, all over the world, Unitarian Universalists light the flaming chalice. We light one every Sunday when we gather for worship. Some of us have smaller chalices in our home, and we light those before meals and special times. We have all kinds of chalices. Chalices made out of wood, shaped out of glass, molded out of clay. We even wear them as jewelry or as pictures on our clothes. Chalices come in lots of different shapes and sizes and colors, just like Unitarian Universalists. So now, I hope you understand why we chose to tell this story on this Sunday, focusing on justice and the spirit that feeds it. Is there anyone who has never lit the chalice who would like to? Don't be shy. Okay. And now we invite Allison to come to do our chalice reading.
Good morning. I feel like that story is sort of the punchline to what happens when you put together a UU minister, a social worker, and an artist. Blessed is the fire that burns deep in the soul. It is the flame of the human spirit touched into being by the mystery of life. It is the fire of reason, the fire of compassion, the fire of community, the fire of justice, the fire of faith. It is the fire of love burning deep in the human heart, the divine glow in every life.
Normally we would sing the children out, but we have some special children that we want to introduce you to first. So I'm going to do the welcome, and then we'll sing the children to their classes. Good morning. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist community of the mountains here in Grass Valley, California. And welcome all of you on Zoom. We imagine we're seeing you. After offering the welcome at UUCM hundreds of times, I decided maybe I should look up what welcome actually means. So I did some research and I came across a definition that really resonates with me. Here's the definition: to greet with pleasure the presence of another. I like it. If you notice facial expressions, you will have noticed my eyes lighting up when I see you. And if you notice tone of voice, you will hear it there too. It brings me pleasure to see you here today. But I'm not the only welcomer here. Take a moment to make eye contact with the person sitting near you, if you're willing and have the ability to do that. Chances are they're finding pleasure in your presence as well. Lots of bright eyes, lots of bright eyes. Today's service continues our summer series of exploring 6 values with love as the center, the action point. This is part of a process that Unitarian Universalists all over the country are undertaking, clarifying for this new era what matters most to us and why. We're trying out new language for size and fit to decide together whether we've got this right enough to claim these values and language for ourselves. This week, we're exploring the value of justice, in case you didn't notice. In a moment, Reverend Kevin will invite some of you to share the actual proposed language that would go into the UUA bylaws for the values of justice. Be sure to listen for the action words, the verbs, like work and dismantle and support. As he and I planned this service, which is a delicious process, again and again we return to the realization of the crucially deep tie between justice and spirituality. Some say that justice and spirituality are competitors for our attention and time. My personal experience has shown me that the more deeply I grow spiritually, the more compelled I am to stand up in acts of justice. And the more acts of justice that I commit, the more I am drawn to deepen and strengthen my spirit in spiritual practice. Some are confused by this. For me, my deepening spirituality floods me with a kind of love that compels me to take actions that all may thrive. Some actions are bite-sized, like the little flowers on our altar, and like writing "Get Out the Vote" postcards or helping prepare a living space for a family escaping an unsafe country. Some actions are a bit uncomfortable for me, the dahlias and size of the dahlias in the middle, but I do them, like standing witness in public. And some are well out of my comfort area, and they're big, like courageously risking a simple conversation of curiosity with someone who stridently ridicules truths I hold dear. It's hard for me. Small or large, these actions require me to tap into a well of spiritual strength which must continually be replenished, and which in turn, again and again, sends me out to express my love in public, justice. In today's service, we seek to recognize the wisdom in all of us, We invite all of us to open ourselves to the process of realizing the deep mutual intertwining of our internal spiritual journey and our expression of love in public. And now a very special welcome to Mustafa Andu and her sons Jean-Daniel and Samuel, here in our community through the Compassionate Parole Program for Residents of Haiti. Would you stand if you're willing so we can say hello to you? And now, Lisa and Steve are their hosts. And Lisa, would you come up and tell us a little bit about their process and a brief overview of how this big transition is going for them and for you? Well, we're going to sing them out in just a minute.
So it began about 10 or 12 years ago, after the earthquake in Haiti in 2010. A man named Nazaire Saint-Fort, who was a college student at the time, became active in trying to get the university in Haiti, the state university, to help rebuild the agricultural education system in Haiti. And so he made contact with some students at UC Davis, and together they began the UC Haiti initiative that combined forces between the State University in Haiti and University of California all over the state, not just the Davis campus, but many campuses where physicians and agricultural extension teachers and practitioners and farmers all joined together to help rebuild the university education system out in the countryside in Haiti. And Steve, my husband, Steve Temple, was an agronomist at UC Davis at the time, and I was still working with him in sustainable agriculture. No, actually, I had already become a minister. So I was in Portland, Oregon at the time, but they joined forces. And so we've known Nazaire Saint-Fort, the husband and father of this family, the Andu Saint-Fort family, for over 10 years. And we've been trying to work with them to rebuild the extension education system in Haiti. But then 2 years ago, the president of Haiti was assassinated and the country devolved into chaos. It has been completely unsafe for anyone to live there. So in January, the Biden administration established the humanitarian parole program for people of Haiti, Nicaragua, Venezuela, and Cuba. And we filled out the paperwork to sponsor the family in January, but alas, because of the chaos in the country, Nazaire was not able to get his passport renewed until May. So Mustafa and her 2 children are here with us alone, without their husband and father. The boys cry nightly for their father. They miss him deeply and passionately. And Steve, my husband, as you may know, was seriously injured right at the time that we were beginning to prepare for the family to arrive at our house. So many of you came and donated money and time and things, and we made a home for this family. But Mustafa and I have been doing it, the daily life, by ourselves. We've been 2 women together trying to help the children adjust, and it has not been easy for either of us. And so we are still in need of help. Like, we would love to have someone come and take the family to places. School starts on Wednesday, but there's still a couple more days where we could use someone to come over and spend some time with the boys so that Mustafa could have a little break. That would be great. We can still use donations of money because they're eligible for some benefits, but not all of the benefits that they would be if they were here as refugees, which technically they're not. So there's still a lot of help that we need. And I keep sending out little bulletins saying, okay, now we need this, now we need this. And I hope it doesn't annoy you too much and you don't just shut off, because the real work of justice is long and hard. It is not something that gets done by giving one little thing or giving $100. It is long and hard. This family will be here for at least 2 years. It's not going to be easy for any of that time. We have little boys who don't have their father, and they need people to take an interest in them and love them and be kind to them and show them what it is to be a human being in this kind of community where we reach out, because justice for us isn't a matter of balancing scales like some people sing in Spirit of Life when you do the sign language for that song. If you get an ASL interpreter to interpret that song, they do a motion not of balancing scales. That's not what justice is. Justice is equality around the table. That's what justice is. It's making all people welcome and all people equal. And that's why justice, because it's so damn hard and so damn long, takes love. And we have to be filled by a source of love, whatever that means in terms of spiritual practice. We have to continually do that practice. Sometimes that practice does mean writing postcards, because that makes us feel good, like we're joining something great and we make a difference. We make a huge difference, but sometimes it's so hard. And we need to be filled with love continually, renewed and refreshed and renewed and refreshed. So we still have a long way to go. We've got school starting on Wednesday. The kids need school supplies. They have to go, she has to go, Mustafa has to go to Sacramento to see what benefits she might be eligible for in Sacramento through the U.S. Customs and Immigration Services Office of Refugee Resettlement. There's just a lot of paperwork. We're constantly filling out forms, right, Mustafa? A lot of paperwork. Yeah, so we could use your help with all of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. There's the message in a nutshell for today, right? And yes, we'll be paying attention along the way. And in fact, what I'd invite you to do today is just note a date, September 9th. It's actually Saturday. It says Friday here, but it's Saturday, September 9th. We'll have an evening event at 7 o'clock to meet the family, learn a little bit about Haiti and the situation there, and then to invite our support for the long haul. So I invite you to mark September 9th on your calendar, Saturday, September 9th. You'll hear more. I invite you to take a breath. And yeah, take a breath, right? Because what we're about to do is sing our young ones on their way with that idea of supporting that light, right? In each of us and in each of them. So together, let's sing.
This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.
Recently, I read Waking Up. It's a guide to, the subtitle is A Guide to Spirituality Without Religion. It's by Sam Harris. But in it, he describes taking the drug ecstasy when he was younger, back in 1987, and he did it with a best friend. And as they sat quietly while the drug took hold, Harris said he suddenly was struck by the knowledge that he loved his friend. He had this sense of love for his friend. And he said that shouldn't have surprised him, being they were best friends, but in that moment, he felt profoundly his love for his friend. And then he realized that his love came woven in with an equally profound ethical implication. That out of that love, he wanted his friend to be happy. Harris's previous feelings of envy about his friend and his own self-concern, those fell away. And he said, truly wanting his friend to be happy made his friend's happiness his own. In that moment, it all felt so clear and so obvious to Harris. Slightly euphoric, perhaps, yes, and also entirely matter of fact. This is how it is. And then he writes, came the insight that irrevocably transformed my sense of how good human life could be. I was feeling boundless love for one of my best friends. The mic is booming a little bit there. I was feeling boundless love for one of my best friends and suddenly realized that if a stranger had walked through the door at that moment, they would have been fully included in this love. It wasn't just about his friend. He said he realized that love was at bottom impersonal and deeper than any personal history could justify. Indeed, he said, a transactional form of love, I love you because of these qualities or experiences, that made no sense at all. I love you because made no sense. Cornel West said famously that justice is what love looks like in public. That's it, a sense of deep love and connection that's profound enough to be woven through with that inescapable response to want happiness and well-being and goodness for everyone, everything that's encompassed in that circle of love. And more, what comes with it is this impulse to help that happen, this impulse to help that happiness happen. Spiritual practices of many kinds, with or without the aid of perception-altering drugs, are meant ultimately to cultivate that kind of feeling of love and awareness of connection. And so at their best, spiritual practices move a person to that kind of caring action, to manifest love, not just as a feeling we feel inside, but as just a totally natural expression of that love in our outer lives, in our shared lives. In other words, in the public spheres. As Gail has already named, today we invest ourselves in just realizing that deep mutual intertwining of our internal spiritual journey and our expression of love in public, also known as justice. So here's the proposed language for naming this value of love in public for us Unitarian Universalists. This value of justice that, among the others, is centered in love. So I've asked Michelle and Penny, and is there one third person? And Gwen are going to read the language. I invite you to listen to it and take it to heart. Here comes the microphone.
Justice.
Paul, that can stay up there.
Do I have to stand? Okay.
Oh, and is the microphone on?
All
There we go.
Justice. We work to be. Okay.
There you go.
Justice. We work to be diverse, multicultural, beloved communities where we all thrive.
We covenant to dismantle racism and all forms of systematic oppression.
We support the use of inclusive democratic processes to make the decisions within our congregations and in the society at large.
Thank you. Now, I used to say that supporting the use of the democratic processes was so obvious as to be unnecessary to name. No longer. Promising to dismantle racism and all forms of systemic oppression is a huge and vital and long-term commitment, one that not everyone understands or yet claims. And it all begins with working to be ourselves a community where all thrive. That's the key, right? A community where all thrive, meaning working to be a beloved community. No small thing and no small goal. Each of those pieces that were just named is an aspect of justice in its own way. And each is, in its own way, a natural outcome of prioritizing love, of putting love at the center, if we will let it be our response. Each piece is a way of loving everyone who might come into the room. You might think this is Pachelbel. This is Abby's take on remembering that love is love. She wrote this in response to marriage equality when that was arising. Love, love, love. All you need is love, love, love. All we 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 need is love, is love, is love. Another possible. Love is love, is love, is love. All we need is love, is love, is love, is love. All we need is love, love, 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 love. All we need is Thich Nhat Hanh, the Buddhist teacher of beloved memory, taught that the main affliction of our times is that we don't know how to handle the suffering inside of us. We try to cover it up, run from it, hide from it, ignore it, rather than face our suffering with compassion. As long as we do, he said, happiness will always elude us. So one of the reasons we take time to focus our attention each Sunday to notice our breathing and the sensations in our bodies is to cultivate our mindfulness, our awareness of what's happening right here and right now in our bodies, in our feelings, in our perceptions and around us. The only time we're truly alive, Thich Nhat Hanh taught, is when our mind is with the body and not somewhere else. Mindfulness, he wrote, is the best way to be with our suffering without being overwhelmed by it. I know Maui is on many people's minds today. Already I've talked to several people in the congregation who either spent significant portions of their life in Hawaii or even on Maui, or who have relatives or friends who are there. Maybe it's a more personal suffering that we hold. One of the things I appreciate about Thich Nhat Hanh's invitation, he says the job is to cradle our suffering, not to push it away, not to latch onto it, but to cradle it, to hold it, to meet it like we would a crying baby, with tenderness, without judgment. Whenever the suffering starts to become too much, he says, come back to that breathing. It's one of the ways we can learn to hold our suffering over time without being overwhelmed by it. And there's more. He says that when we take care of that suffering inside of us, then we have more clarity and energy and strength to address the suffering, the violence, the poverty, the inequity of our loved ones, as well as our suffering in the wider world. So when we take care of this, we're better able to take care of that. So with this weekly ritual of noticing and greeting and inviting the joy and the sorrow within, we invite attention to our breathing, to follow our breathing as it draws air in and lets air out. Draws air in and lets air out. Cradling. With our breathing, we arrive in this moment. Breathing in, knowing the suffering's there, yes. Breathing out, saying hello to it for a moment. Breathing in, knowing the suffering's there. Breathing out, saying hello to it. And the music, the movement, the placing of stones in the water to represent the joys as well as the sorrows we carry, I invite you to be at that same time the bowl of cool water for each other, to be the community that holds each of us tenderly. I invite you to continue to hold the silence and your quiet caring, to keep following your breath, to keep greeting your suffering, and so to strengthen your chance to meet the suffering in the world. Those online, I invite you to do the same, and also, if you're so moved, to type into the chat the joy or the sorrow that's especially strong in you today. Let's hold each other. One of my very early sermons here, I spoke of polarities. Two possibilities that look like they're mutually exclusive and opposites, a choice or a problem to be solved, but that are in truth two realities that are interwoven with each other. The classic example is breathing. And the quickest way to get to the point here is to ask, is it better to breathe in or better to breathe out? Isn't it such an accessible and visceral example? Of course, the answer is yes. Yes, it's better to breathe in or to breathe out, or. Now, realizing that this is the goal is not to choose between the two, right? That's not a choice between the two, but to keep moving between the two and to keep paying attention to what's needed when. So the upside of breathing in is you get all that oxygen in your body and blood, great, right? The upside of breathing out is you clean out all that carbon dioxide. But too much focus on breathing in, and that carbon dioxide starts to build up. And too much focus on breathing out, and there's not enough oxygen. We need both in some rhythm that works for our being and our body. I shared at other times and in the description for this service that some members of this congregation feel that there's too much focus on justice and not enough on our spiritual health and growth and sense of connection. And that other members feel we're too focused on the spiritual connection piece and don't evidence enough care about justice. The perspective depends in part upon our natures, right? But also on where we are in this cycle. Short-term and long-term. Do we need to focus on cultivating our internal spiritual health and wholeness, or on our outreach to nurture justice in the world? As if it's one or the other. Though, when you're drawn to one or the other of those poles, it's natural to wonder why everyone else isn't there with you, caring about what you care about to the same extent and in the same ways. And here we are, together. So I found this symbol. Paul, would you put that slide up? The symbol of fire and ice. I know it's a bit dramatic, but I like it. For me, it matches in a general way that fiery energy of those who are passionate about justice and who want everyone else to be. Paul, you can leave that up for a bit. And those who are drawn to look inward and to tend to personal wholeness and grounding. It's a hot process in its own way, but it's cool and still in terms of its affect, right? Each side, if viewed separately, looks like a problem to be solved. We need people to get fired up to work for justice. So the question becomes, how do we do that? With a continual search for the right answer for that to happen. Or we need to help people grow in depth and substance, to cultivate their compassion and love and their emotional and spiritual integrity. So the question becomes, how do we do that? With a continual search for the right answer. Thanks, Paul. Both are valid searches for answers, right? And they both need more explicit attention in our community. I see that. In addition to that, however, I'm realizing that we need to be linking those two things more consciously and more directly and more explicitly to each other. Polarities are never solved like true either-or problems. They're never finally solved. They're always instead navigated or maybe managed sometimes. The goal is to skillfully travel that dynamic energy that weaves between and around the two, and to get the benefit from the upside of each. What's the benefit of going inward? What's the benefit of that outward reach? And minimizing the downside, overextending to the point of exhaustion, or being so narrowly personally focused that we don't look outward, right? There's an upside and a downside to each. How do we get the best of each side? The polarity question is, how can we better ground our call and our work toward justice in our relationships and in that deep emotional and spiritual work and reflection, those practices that can help us sustain that work and help us sustain that work with heart and hope and fullness and courage and kindness? And how can we strengthen our relationships to one another and better extend our deep personal inner spiritual growth beyond just looking at ourselves, beyond our close-in circles even, to live our value of love as publicly as we can. Never to be entirely solved to the satisfaction of maybe anyone, but perhaps navigated skillfully and awarely and deeply enough to strengthen everyone in the process, even in the midst of such urgent times as these. While we're pondering that for a moment, I invite us to sing, to anchor the moment in our bodies. Holly Near hands us polarity in a song, recognizing that we are both gentle and angry. It's really about appropriate and healthy moral outrage, but moral outrage is an awkward number of syllables to squeeze in. So let's sing this first verse, knowing both our gentleness and our outrage at the unnecessary suffering being caused in our nation and our world. I invite you to rise in body and in spirit.
We are gentle, angry people, and we are singing for our lives. We are a gentle, angry people, and we are singing for our lives. One more time. We are a gentle, angry people, and we are singing for our lives. We are a gentle, angry people, and we are singing for our lives.
Thank you. So I invite you to think for just a moment about the ways that doing justice actually feeds your spirit, and the ways that feeding your spirit invites you to reach out, just in your own life, your own examples. Just imagine those for a moment. Anybody have one that you would name, a person or two? What would you name? Anyone have that experience?
So I was on a flight traveling for 30 hours. I was on a flight to Tanzania. I was on a flight to Tanzania traveling for 30 hours, and on one of the 14-hour legs, I had a woman next to me with a one-year-old baby. I had a woman on the other side of me with a 4-month-old baby. So this is a 14-hour flight that I get to do. And so I spent 14 hours being a surrogate grandma, and I helped take care of the 4-month-old. I actually crawled down the aisles chasing the one-year-old, because my thought was, well, I can be mad that they're going to be crying babies next to me, or I can just share who I am and have a good time and keep all the rest of the people on the plane happy too. So I spent 14 hours being grandma.
Grandma justice. Grandma kindness and justice. One more. Somebody else who's got has a link between those two.
Pursuing justice through postcarding, trying to encourage voter participation and counter voter suppression is very fulfilling. Even more so when it turned out that progressive candidates won in those elections.
Fulfilling when it succeeded in particular. Yeah, let's actually do one more. One more person. Renee's got one. To the left there.
In response to the Youth Climate March a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, drawing up a I am the Lorax and I speak for the trees sign and coming out to join the teenagers for the climate strike, along with a lot of others from UUCM.
I'm going to beg your patience for a little bit. We'll go a little bit longer than normal. I don't think too much though, but I want to pick up on something Allison shared after our equity service a couple weeks ago. We were looking at various metaphors for equality, equity, etc. So here's one image of inequality. So this is the idea of an apple tree, source of sustenance, right? Something good. Yeah. So here's one possibility. This is a very unequal system, right? Tree is leaning, first of all, lots of apples on one side, and somebody's going to get, and somebody is not. That would be inequality. True? Okay, well, one option is to give everybody exactly the same tools, exactly the same ladder in this case. That helps one person, one individual, still doesn't help the other, even though they got exactly the same thing, right? That's one kind of representation of equality. Then there's the idea of giving everyone what they need to be able to reach, right? Different size ladders in this case, each able to reach, and still, right? So this is one vision of equity, where people have what they need to reach. And then there's the possibility, Allison pointed out, of justice. Allison had used this with a group of people in schools, right? And they really resonated, she said, with this piece. So the whole point is that that apple tree was not upright. It was bent, and not by accident. That shape of that tree had been happening over all kinds of years, right, in activity. But by this time, it just looks natural. It looks like the tree just grows that way, when in fact, it is shaped that way. It's constantly pulled that way. The work of justice would ask us to right that tree, bend that tree to the extent we could. So one metaphor, I really like this extension of what we were talking about with equity a couple weeks ago, to the work of working toward addressing systemic injustice, which is looking at the tree itself, right? That has been shaped and not by accident, even though it might look natural. Justice. Being a diverse, multicultural, beloved community where all thrive, the language invites, dismantling racism and all forms of systemic oppression, dismantling racism and all forms of systemic oppression, supporting the use of inclusive democratic processes to make decisions easier for us. But this is all tree bending work, right? Tree writing work, words and work worthy of our deep interrogation and our conversation and our commitment. And as Lisa pointed out, none of it will be easy or fast or completed. With your help and heart and willingness and creativity, we will dig into each of those elements throughout this year and beyond. The work of bending the moral arc of the tree toward justice, because our love compels us to. Our love compels us to care and want good for everybody. That's hard, often scary, and totally unguaranteed work. As you know, it takes a lot to have enough energy and courage to do it in the first place, not to mention to keep it up for the long haul. Fear and anger can become the driving energies if we do that without let up and without a conscious grounding in compassion and self-care and love. Justice advocates often speak of burnout and discouragement at key times in their journey as justice advocates. And the antidote to burnout, as we have heard at other times, is not merely rest, but rather wholeheartedness. The antidote to burnout is wholeheartedness. Sustaining outward with this outward reaching love, that requires a power source. It requires time to take in and strengthen and shore up. It requires opportunities to reflect, to grow insight and awareness, and an ever more honest and true sense of oneself. It requires deep and real and honest connections among us. It requires an ongoing investment in our own wholeheartedness. And none of that just happens on its own. We need to breathe in as well as to breathe out. Some of us would name this breathing in work our spiritual work. Your UUCM mission names it cultivating our spiritual, emotional, and intellectual strength in order to create a world more compassionate, sustainable, and just. The breathing out. You've already named it for us. Sam Harris claims that wisdom is really an ability to follow your own advice. That's wisdom. Someone observed to me here that at UUCM, we're often better at speaking our values than implementing them. A human truth, right? I know that's true for me, certainly. Wherever you locate yourself in this arcing rhythm right now, this tree riding rhythm, I ask for your help this year in living our values, your creative and proactive help in living into the best of what each of those poles offers and asks of us, and your help in consciously linking the two. I ask for your help in recognizing and creating what we and others need to be spiritually centered, grounded, and growing, and fiery tree-riding agents for justice in the world, near and far. It's both. Now, we could have talked about those specific elements of justice making, and those are important, and we need to, but I wanted to address this challenge as a preparatory seed planting invitation to look at the how we do it. So we have the best chance of doing this together. And some of us are going to be here, and some of us are going to be here, and some of us are going to be here, and some of us are going to be here. And to know that, and to let the rhythm call us to the next breath in or the breath out. So may we be. With your help, so may we be. Yeah, let's put this in our bodies. Gentle, angry, and gentle, loving. And feel it out for you. I was so pissed off this week when I was reading about the librarians who are being so targeted. Just librarians. Librarians, yeah. We have our own thing that pushes our buttons that day, right? So I invite you to feel both the gentleness and the anger. Feel it out.
We are gentle, angry people. We are singing, singing for our lives. We are gentle, angry people. And we are singing, singing for our lives. We are gentle, loving people, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are gentle, loving people, and we are singing, singing for our lives.
There we are, both. The congregation received a set of pins that many are wearing already for being a good trouble congregation. There we go, good trouble. There's the mix. I love it that it has love and the heart, and then the bold colors we associate with justice making. I invite you to wear it with that fullness in mind, to wear your pin. And if you didn't get one, or if you're at home, there'll be some more here, but also there'll be a chance to get some in a moment during the offertory.
And the polarities continue. How does the offering fit in? Is it a spiritual act? Is it a sacrament? Does something change in us when we give freely and lovingly? Or is it an act of justice, providing resources for the work of equity, civil rights, voting rights, climate? The answer is, of course, both and. And as such, our offering is a sacred act, the free and generous support of each of us. Friends, members, visitors, is what fuels our community and our mission. Without that support, the flame of justice, community, and love cannot burn brightly. To warm ourselves and as a beacon in a world threatened by fear and division. This month, 25% or more, if you like, of our offering will support Animal Place, whose mission is to provide a refuge for unwanted farm animals, to further their welfare through education of the public, and to foster the ethics of responsibility towards non-human animals by advocating a vegan lifestyle. If you're here in person and would like 100% of your gift to go to Animal Place, please place it in the white basket when it comes to you. If you are on Zoom, please see the next slides for the ways to give. Your work, your giving is vital to our ability to sustain our work in our community. Thank you for your generosity.
And it's a little more contemporary than some of the songs that came from the 60s, but we do want things to keep going forward. I wrote this song after Harvey Milk and Mayor Moscone were assassinated in San Francisco, and then the song flew off around the world, and people keep adding verses, so we'll do a variety of verses, and people can grab a microphone. Not you don't sing a microphone. And here we go. We are a gentle, angry people, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are gentle, angry people, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are a land of many colors. We are a land of many colors, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are a land of many colors, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are a peaceful, loving people. We are a peaceful, loving people, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are a peaceful, loving people, and we are singing, singing for our lives. I just want to say, as you all travel back to your communities, to just take a moment right now to take the sound of this room into your heart, the look of your comrades, something that you learned, some emotion that you had. And when it gets discouraging and seems absolutely impossible, bring back this moment right here where you know that there were thousands and thousands of people who have worked with you over a lifetime to try to find what it means to be a peaceful person, what it means to be a person who works for justice, what it means to be someone who holds the weight of the horror and at the same time holds the weight of the spectacular beauty of what goes on this planet. And it is our job as conscientious people to be able to hold both parts and move forward with grace and dignity and courage, and you are a great example of that. We are a peaceful, loving people, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are a peaceful, loving people, and we are singing, singing for our lives. Thank you all so much.
Thank you for your generosity. We dedicate these gifts to the work of strengthening the mutual intertwining of our inner spiritual journey and our expression of love in public. And thank you for the ways in which you stepped up to remind us to seek spiritual sustenance, the way you've helped each other and supported our spirits, and all of the people involved today. We're running long, so please read their names so I don't take the time to say them. But each of you have made a huge difference. Thank you, thank you.
Including Gail, thank you. Women's Circle gathers on Monday. Come join in. Postcards are available for getting out the vote in the foyer. You can put your dots on as soon as you've done those cards, even before you've sent them. There's a lot at stake, so it's important. Toby's in concert this afternoon at Peace Lutheran. There's a full-page spread of him, and he wants you to know that he's likely to do that program here at some point, too. Love Walk is going to be on August 27th. Actually, you'll notice part of it's during the service time, so stay tuned. We're doing some adapting and maybe disrupting of our usual way of doing things, so I just want to give you that alert. And September 9th on your calendar. Remember, it's Saturday, actually. I think we'll just go right to the closing words. So our song would be Answering the Call of Love, right? That's the message. Emboldened by faith, we dare to proclaim we're answering the call of love. I invite you to rise in body or in spirit for a moment to look at your fellow travelers around the fire and ice of justice and inner work and so much else. Not only today, but throughout our heritage and histories, we are at our best, yes, gentle and loving and angry and morally outraged and spirit-seeking and justice-seeking people. May we be singing not only for our lives, but for all lives. And not only singing, but doing, moving, meditating, shouting, praying, writing, donating, breathing, marching, as the Spirit says. Whatever we discover is required in a given moment and along that infinity-shaped path that encircles and that weaves together the work of the Spirit and the work of justice, love made visible in public. Knowing this, let's carry this flame, now that we have newly been reminded of that history of the chalice. Let us together, pause, slide, carry the flame of peace and love until we meet again. Join us for refreshments if you're here in the room, and otherwise we'll see you next week for our camp in. Thanks, everybody.